Hello and welcome. Today's project is negative thinking. Now, if you're suffering from anxiety, health anxiety, depression, if you're in a constant loop of negative thoughts that just keep playing themselves out, this is the video you need to rewatch and implement, because I'm talking about what's behind negative thinking and also some tools and strategies that you need to do today to end this cycle. Now, I used to walk around with catastrophic thoughts being produced by my right hemisphere, images of the unknown, of people that I love, fears of mine playing themselves out, and I would get so invested in those fears and self-doubts and self-limiting thoughts that I would be a slave to them. And why we tend towards the negatives is because the novelty is what really does us in, right? Because everything that's outside of our known territory, our comfort zone, is a threat to us, right? To venture outside of the comforting tribe is to go out into the unknown where potential predators lie, obviously, and out there is where we gather new information, because everything around the tribe that we've already established some known space that's already been explored. But when we step outside into the unknown, we're activating new circuits and we're creating more neural pathways, and there are a lot of ways where we can get lost and encounter new creatures and new animals that could tear us apart. So whatever's outside of the lit kingdom, in the darkness, in what we cannot see, well, our brains have evolved to produce abstractions of what could potentially be out there. Now, what I mean by that is, you know this from when you're a child, you go into the crawl space and your mind populates itself with potential what ifs lurking in the crawl space. Bugs, rats, any sort of insect, snakes, any monster. Your mind just goes on, and you get startled and you don't even want to go in that crawl space. But here's what's so cool is that we have a left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is our rational brain. It's what we use to problem solve and make the irrational brain, the unknown, into something familiar. That's what we need to do in order to calm our anxiety system. Whenever we step outside in the unknown, or when we're confronted with the unknown, our anxiety system kicks in and we have an opportunity here to solve the problem. Okay? So the negative thinking is a sign that there are problems to be solved. But what do we do nowadays? We react to the thought and then we repress it. We distract ourselves with some sort of external means. Could be anything from social media, Netflix, food, alcohol, people, you name it. We can distract. But what we need to do instead is react and then replace the repression with rationalization. We need to solve the problem. We need to shine a light on what's lurking in that darkness, in the unknown. So we need to use that internal voice to set boundaries for ourselves. And we have, at some point in our lives, an underdeveloped, needy conscience. It's underdeveloped. And we need to establish a dialogue with our conscience in order for us to become independent, and also to break outside of what's comforting to us, but also to become courageous people. And I'll get into really the reasons behind that later in this video. But you see this today when you know someone who's a 40-year-old, 20-year-old, right? They're 40, they're 50, they're 60 even, and they're still the same person as they were when they're 20. And you're like, man, these people haven't changed much. They're still eating the same way, talking the same way, believing in the same things, liking the same things. They're like a broken record. They're just so predictable. And people who have developed a proper dialogue with their conscience, they're not so predictable. They're always expanding and growing, and they're always treading outside of the safe confines of the tribe into the darkness and exploring that. So we see in Pinocchio, because Pinocchio is a great example of that dialogue between the boy and the underdeveloped conscience, right? Like, of course, at the beginning of Pinocchio is a wooden-headed puppet who's being pulled by unseen forces from behind the scenes, right? I mean, that's who we all are at some point, right? We're like a puppet of culture and our parents, right? We're just going by what we've been taught. We're not really independent people at this point. We're really dependent people. And so you see at the beginning of this story, the conscience, the cricket is as underdeveloped as Pinocchio. Just as stupid, just as naive, just as, ignorant as Pinocchio. But here's the thing. As Pinocchio starts to venture outside into the world, he starts to move away from his father, from the safe confines of his childhood, out into the world, and he starts to fail. He starts to develop as a person. He starts to learn how to survive on his own. That's the key thing here. He starts to learn how to survive on his own and overcome failure. And as he's doing this, the cricket, which is his conscience, is developing as well. So when Pinocchio, by the end of the movie, when he becomes a real boy, what happens is that the conscience is way more developed at this point. You actually see the cricket, he's wearing nicer clothes, he's looking sharp, he's looking more confident, and you see this different friendship between Pinocchio and the cricket. It's like they almost have way more respect for each other by the end of the movie. The friendship, the relationship is way more succinct, and it's just way stronger than it used to be. But that's the thing here. Jean Piaget, who's a developmental psychologist, he says that our actions are more sophisticated than anything else. You can tell someone's beliefs just by how they act. So even though the brain says, no, don't do it, you should fear this, you should avoid this, it doesn't mean that you should. Quite the contrary. It actually means that that thing that you're fearing is unexplored, and that you need to confront what's unexplored so that you make it into something known, and thus relieving your anxiety and making you into a stronger, more capable human being. So if you're not willing to step outside of what's familiar, or if you're not willing to challenge yourself, then, well, do not expect any real change to occur. Because if you listen to what your mind is telling you, oh, you should avoid this, don't confront this thing, then you're just going to shrink your world down so damn small that you're going to look into the mirror and you'll see someone who is small, who's incapable. And that self-talk is pretty self-evident, because for me it was. I looked into the mirror and I saw somebody who was like weak person, incapable of hard work, discipline, success. But here's what I love about Pinocchio. The more Pinocchio stumbles into failure and rises above failure, the more he develops and becomes a real person. Like I said before, our actions are more sophisticated than anything else. So do the disciplines, Do the disciplines even if the mind says, no, don't do it. Because what you're doing is you're building on your tolerance. What you're saying to yourself is, hey, wait, I'm capable of much more than I thought I was capable of. And then you look into the mirror and you see somebody totally different. And then I have another technique which is really helpful, the elastic band technique. So when I was going through my anxiety recovery, I wore an elastic band on my wrist. And whenever I was in an emotional state, a negative emotional state, I would slap the band on my wrist and replace the negative thought with a positive image. Okay, this is so great because I'm letting the other image go over time, because it just doesn't happen overnight. We've built up strong neural pathways of the negative thought that we've entertained for a long time, and now you want to start to think a different way overnight. Well, it's just not going to happen overnight. So you have to start to train your brain into thinking a new way. So I slap the band, I replace the negative thought with an empowering thought, an image that makes me feel good, empowered. And then what happens is that I do this over a long period of time. I start to reflexively go back to the empowering thought without the need of the elastic band. The elastic band is just a distraction tool to help me build a new pathway, but eventually do it over a long period of time. You're not even going to need the band anymore because you've been practicing a new way of thinking at this point. And then a new way to challenge old negative thinking is to use that internal voice to reject those thoughts and let them go. So for me, I used mantras like, I reject that. So what? And I'm reducing the power they have by repeating this mantra. I'm letting them go. And by doing this over time, just like the elastic band, similar, these new empowering thoughts will become the habit. And then when a thought comes in that's negative, you challenge the thought with the new thought you've made from your left hemisphere. I reject it. So what? That's not who I am. You start to view the thought in a different light. So you want to reframe thoughts as well. I love in Harry Potter, I say this all the time, but I love it so much. Sirius tells Harry, it's not the thoughts that define who we are, but it's what we do. It's our actions that make us who we are. And because Harry was contending with a lot of negative thoughts from Voldemort. And that just really blew me away when I heard that, and it makes sense. So to conclude this video, our actions are more sophisticated. Even though the mind says, don't do it, doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. You should do the disciplines that'll make you more braver, that'll build upon your character. So confronting what's lurking in the unknown, confronting the shadow is what's necessary for change. And that's where I'm going to leave you on today's video. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for leaving your comments. Thank you for sharing your stories. If you haven't shared your story yet, leave your story below, because you just might change someone's life by doing that. Rise above anxiety. I'll see you next time. Make sure to leave your comments below. Subscribe so that you'll be the first to know whenever I release a new video. And rise above anxiety. I'll see you next time.